How's it going, everybody? This is Dave Meltzer. We're going to be here for the next 2 hours talking pro wrestling. We got Brian Alvarez of Figure 4 Weekly with us, and we're going to be joined in about a half an hour or so by Max Payne, who had a very interesting film clip of a movie documentary that we talked about a while ago, and got a lot of controversy, so he's back, and he can answer all of your questions about that, or we can talk to him about any aspect of his pro wrestling career. Of course, he worked in his wrestling life. He was an amateur standout, went to New Japan, ended up in both WWF as Man Mountain Rock, WCW as Max Payne, obviously. We're Memphis. There's a couple other circuits in there, but those were the main ones. But anyway, we can talk about that and musical career, all that kind of stuff. Brian, how are you today?
Doing good.
That's good. Just before we went on the air, and I don't want to comment more about this because I don't know more about it yet, but I got the word that the WWF they were running a house show at San Francisco at the Cow Palace on June 30th, and the show was canceled. And, that's really all I know. And I guess we'll probably talk more about it tomorrow because I'll probably know more about it tomorrow. But tickets were put on sale Saturday, and if it was canceled today, there's usually probably a pretty good explanation, which is probably not a good explanation. But anyway.
Still, that's a month and a half away.
I know. Very interesting.
If it were a ticket sale thing, it just seems like they were giving up awfully early.
The thing is, though, when it comes to tickets now, when it comes to wrestling, if the tickets don't...
It's all first day?
It's pretty much... It's not all first day, but it's like 70% first day. Like, if the first day is a flop, you pretty much know that you're in trouble. Mm-hmm. It's hard to come back. With WCW, it was the same way. It was like, they pretty much knew, what range they would be in on day one. I mean, you could pick it up a little bit, and sometimes, you get good late response for some shows, usually not. And I think that's been the case, too, with because the people who want to buy tickets buy it the first day, because they know that's when all the good tickets are available. And that casual audience, they really just don't seem to buy late much. I mean, obviously there's some. So, yeah. I mean, I remember I used to get with the WCW, like the day-by-day ticket sales, and, you might get like 60 tickets or 100 tickets, sold every couple days, which, over the course of, a month or so, could be a couple of thousand. But let's just say and I don't know what they started with. I don't know anything. So, anyway, just got that info. Let me see. Not a whole heck of a lot of news here, actually, today. Any big stuff talk about that we haven't talked about?
I don't think so.
There's just the SmackDown tonight, and tonight's SmackDown is going to be very interesting. This is a number that we have to pay attention to because there's no reason that the number shouldn't be way up. If the number is, I think at this point in time, anybody will take anything up. Last week showed it a 4-0. People will take anything up as being a positive, but really the number, you can't. I'm not saying you can turn around with one good TV on Monday, and you can't. Okay, so that's ridiculous, but it really needs to be about a 4-2 or a 4-3, just by the fact that there's no NBC comedies going against them. Everyone's in reruns. Survivor's gone. I mean,
Plus, Monday was a good show. I mean, if you put everything together, logically, the number should be up tonight, but we've said it a million times, logic really means absolutely nothing as far as ratings and a lot of things in wrestling go.
Well, one of the things, and this was something that, happened with WCW, when you turn off a consumer, and it's very hard to get them back. You know what I mean? Because they're not, it's like somebody wrote me about Monday's show, and they're going like, you're raving about Monday's show and everything. And believe me, it's better to do a good show than a bad show. But they're going like, all of those people they lost, they didn't watch Monday's show, so they don't know what they missed. Now, some of them are going to get it on word of mouth, but the amount of people who are going to get it on word of mouth, that's not enough to build the rating up that much. A little bit, but not much.
Well, one of the things we noticed, too, is, when things are hot, you can almost do no wrong, and when things are not hot, then, whatever you do, it really isn't going to make a whole lot of impact week by week. I mean, there was a period when WCW was just sliding like crazy, and they'd have a good show every now and then, but in the grand scheme of things, it just did not matter. I mean, it has to be consistent. Every week has to be good, building towards something, or, just one show means nothing.
That's right. Building towards something is the key. There's got to be something that people want that's dangling in front of them to keep them tuning in. Let's see. Triple H, today was the surgery. Have you heard any update on that?
Nothing.
Okay, neither have I. surgery on his torn quad and possible tendon damage as well in the knee. And we'll probably hear more about that probably today or tomorrow. Let's see. Here we got the poll question for yesterday was, of course, yesterday was the second-year anniversary of the death of Owen Hart. What was Owen Hart's best series of matches? A was Owen Hart and Ben Basarab against the Viet Cong Express, which got 1% of the vote, which I think was Ben Basarab.
Can I predict this poll real quick as to what the winner will be?
Yeah.
Brett Owen.
You're wrong. Okay, anyway.
Really?
Yes. But I think it was stacked. So I would think that the real winner should have been Brett Owen, too. But anyway, we'll get to that in a second. Owen and Ben Basarab against the Viet Cong Express. I think it was Ben Basarab and his ex-wife and a couple other people. Owen Hart and Hiroshi Hase, 1%. Owen Hart and Jushin Liger, 49%. Owen Hart versus Bret Hart, 45%. And Owen Hart against Shawn Michaels, 4%. Today's question is, who should the WWF move to the number 2 heel slot? A, Chris Jericho, which means a turn right away, which I would not do after last week. It's just way too soon. But a few weeks ago, I would have done it. So timing's everything. B, Kurt Angle. C, Undertaker, which would be a turn as well. D, William Regal. And E, someone not on the roster, such as someone in WCW or a free agent. So,
are you telling me that 45% of our listeners watch the Owen Hart-Jushin Liger feud?
49. No.
49?
No, that's like I said. That I know. I didn't take that one.
We're trying to skew our polls.
You can't say that because that guarantees that they will for sure next time.
I know.
The psychology of this all. Let's see. What else do we got?
Only at a wrestling show would something like this happen, you know?
Probably.
Do you think Rush and Malloy do polls and people deliberately try to skew them?
I think they appeal to an older audience than we do.
Okay.
They don't get that many people that vote on the polls either.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they do on the WWF site polls. I mean, like, think about it. All of those people before the WrestleMania that voted like that Battle Royal was the match they most wanted to see. I mean, think about that. It wasn't. There was like not one interview for that Battle Royal. In the grand scheme of things, nobody gave a rat's ass about that Battle Royal. But you know, according to the website, it was like a bigger deal than Rock and Austin. You know, it's just like, you know, a whole bunch of people go, hey, it's so cool, let's vote for the Battle Royal. You know, so that's what happens. Anyway, we got this. I sent this to you the other day, Brian, but I wanted to read it on the air. This is the single worst. We will never top this one. The single worst example of journalism when it comes to professional wrestling of all time. Maybe not. Yeah, I think of all time. I'm going to read this to you. This is from the. What was
this
it?
should be the poll today. Can this article truly be real?
It is real because I got it from several sources.
It's just incredible.
Okay, it was a national cable magazine preview for the King of the Ring pay-per-view, as a matter of fact, and I think that you would have to work very hard and be very creative to have a better article than this. Anyway, it says, The Rock prefers film set to ring. There will be a new champion crowned at this year's King of the Ring. The 8-man elimination tournament is one of the WWF's most popular pay-per-view shows. So far, in the first two sentences, there's not one mistake, which I think is about as far as we go. Last year, The Rock slammed his way to the title, which, of course, Kurt Angle won, with 3 convincing wins, but you can expect such WWF stalwarts as Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H, and The Undertaker to play prominent roles in this year's show. June 24th at East Rutherford, New Jersey. The Rock, he's a victim of his own popularity. The official word from WWF World Headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut, is that The Rock, whose real name is Chris Jericho, has been suspended. The WWF, which surpasses the best soap operas for creating outrageous situations and larger-than-life heroes and cads, has pitted The Rock against WWF boss man Vince McMahon. As we all know, the boss isn't always right, but he's always the boss. But the real reason for The Rock's vacation is he's taking care of business. Jericho considers himself an entertainer, and he has branched out in recent years. His credits include an autobiography that appeared on the New York Times bestseller list and a CD that was less successful. He also made his mark in Hollywood with a feature role in Mummy 2, which is expected to be a box office hit this summer, which, in fact, it was. Jericho declined an invitation to defend his King of the Ring title because he's being paid, this is a good number, $45 million U.S. for another regal role as the Scorpion King in the film of the same name. $45 million.
I at least hope that maybe that guy at least wrote $4.5 million and it was a typo. How could anyone think that this guy was making $45 million for a film role?
Nobody makes that.
Who makes $45 million?
Nobody. I think that the top guys are getting about 20, and they're top guys with like huge
maybe
track
Tom
records.
Cruise, when he did Mission Impossible and took like a cut, it may have been up there like 45
Yeah, that's
million.
true.
No one's getting paid that to do a role.
Yeah. The Rock did stick around long enough to tape Break Down the Walls for the W Fanatic series, available on pay-per-view to Bell Express View subscribers. So anyway, just wanted to read that.
That's the most I don't even know. I couldn't even believe that when I read it. I was certain that was fake. That's how bad it was.
Yeah, that was amazing. Okay, let's get to some emails here. This is from the Reverend Ray Duffy, who says, I've noticed that most of the documents, actually has to do with the phone call that we got the other day. I've noticed that most of the documented incidences of wrestlers dying in Japan have generally been ring-related accidents in Mikokato, Masakazu Fukuda, and Plumerico. However, there doesn't seem to be a glut of deaths as a result of drug abuse, like in the United States, Luis Piccoli, Gino Hernandez, Brian Pillman, Art Barr, Bobby Duncombe. And in the case of note that I could think of that were drug-related, they were David Von Erich, as you mentioned on the show, and Terry Gordy, who would go on to die a second time. Terry Gordy, by the way, just not to confuse anyone, is still alive. So he was not a drug-related death, although he did have a terrible drug problem that pretty much ruined his career. I'm aware that Japan has very strict drug policies with regard to recreational drugs, see why Paul McCartney couldn't come back to Japan. However, I'm not sure of how some other drugs are treated or classified in Japan. You know, Paul McCartney couldn't come back.
Baba had a lot of power.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Okay, so I don't have to say them. That's right. That's right. He sure did. For example, in the case of painkillers, I can't see how somebody like Kobashi or Muto doesn't wake up every morning and pour himself a bowl full of painkillers like they were cornflakes. With the style these guys work, the way they push themselves to perform in the tours they go on, I've got to imagine they are on some sort of medication. However, is it a case where in Japan they have certified painkillers and doctors that make sure the guys don't get too messed up on the medication they're taking? I don't know. You know what? We will ask Darrell Peterson that because he worked Japan. Anyway, not a case of the wrestlers taking pills by themselves without a doctor's prescription or finding someone who will give them the drugs they need under the table, or the promotion makes it their business to make sure their boys don't kill themselves. If they don't have their own medical staff, do they do any drug testing to make sure the guys are clean? I've never heard of testing for drugs by any promotion in Japan, but I have heard of HIV testing. I know that New Japan does that, but I think that's the only thing they do. As mentioned, there are some things that don't get checked for, like steroids, but do they check for things like cocaine or marijuana? You know, they don't. And if they do, is it just local talent, or the guy genes get tested as well? So anyway, we will talk
what
about
this. What about painkillers?
What about them?
I mean, I kind of think that if a lot of those guys were taking a ton of painkillers, that they would fall apart even faster.
I know that they take them. I mean, it's just natural. I mean, you're not going to have any contact sport, baseball, football, basketball. I mean, even not so much baseball, but football, basketball, wrestling, boxing, kickboxing, pride. Those, painkillers are just a part of it because you just get hurt. When you get hurt,
Yeah.
And the key is that you don't get hooked on them, and they're easy to get hooked on. And that's one of the problems of wrestling. This is from Bob Cook, who is a former pro wrestler that many of you probably will remember. Anyway, he was talking about yesterday, somebody asked about who trained Billy Gunn, and he says, I worked with Billy back in 1988, which is amazing because, can you think, I guess it shouldn't surprise me, but Billy Gunn's been wrestling for 14 years? It's a long time. Anyway, a wrestler named Jerry Gray used to run shows over in Florida. Back then, Billy wrestled as Kip Montana. He goes, strange, I think he was a better worker then. I know he worked out at Jerry's school, but I'm not sure if Jerry was the first guy to train him.
Hey, was a better wrestler then.
Yes, yeah, but that's just because he got lazy. I'm not sure if Jerry was the first guy to train him, but do know for sure that Eddie Mansfield was not his trainer or the guy that got him in the business. So anyway, he started with Jerry Gray, it appears.
Maybe this letter really is from Eddie Mansfield.
No, he said that Eddie Mansfield definitely didn't train him. I know.
That's why the letter's from him. He doesn't want responsibility.
Yeah. Let's see. Don't you think that Paul Heyman is going to protect Tajiri as he's done with Rhino?
He really protected Rhino the last 2 days of TV that he wrote.
Yes. I think that putting him in with Regal means that he could be given a chance to help Regal as a silent assassin figure. Boy, I just don't see a silent assassin into Tajiri's future. Plus, being with Regal hopefully means he's going to be in the mix with the upper mid-card guys like Benoit and Kane. Oh, I can just wait for the Tajiri-Kane feud. Instead of jobbing for S.A. Rios on Heat. We'll find out. I mean, hopefully they'll use him well, but the Kane thing, I don't know about that.
Kickboxing match if Russo were back.
Yeah. Let's see. Bill Eadie wrestled a few weeks ago on an independent show as both the Masked Superstar and Demolition Axe. I wonder if he got a double payoff. And he also manages for NWA. Mississippi. In regards to the best trainers, we were talking yesterday about best trainers. We talked about Ultimo Dragon. He goes, what about Jaguar Yokota? Jaguar Yokota is an awesome trainer, no question. I've read she was heavily involved in the development of the All Japan Women girls in the mid to late 80s. She trained pretty much everyone, in that era. And they turned out to be some of the best group of workers that anyone has ever seen. So, yeah, she's right on, it's that whole, she wasn't the only trainer, but their training methods, while absolutely brutal, and it probably wouldn't be stuff that could work in this country because people wouldn't put up with it, they are effective. And he goes, also, I was wondering if you know if Ultimo Dragon and Chris Benoit ever had a standout singles match in Japan. That's a good question, and I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I don't remember one offhand. He goes, I've looked for one on tape for the longest time, but it seems like it's one of those dream matches that should have happened and it never did. But I would think that they must have mixed at some point in WCW, although it probably was like a 3-minute Nitro match, because I don't remember. They never did a pay-per-view, did they? Dragon and Benoit?
I don't remember. I don't even remember like a Nitro match.
I don't remember one offhand. I'm just thinking that they were, around so much. I mean, I remember Dragon worked with Eddie Guerrero a bunch of times. He worked with, Juventud.
It could have been like one of those Saturday night matches, too.
Yeah, he worked with Dean Malenko. I would think that they wrestled just because they were both in the same company for so long. As Andrew, is it true that the NBA on TNT beat the WF on TNN in ratings? Yes, 4.4 to 4.2. It did. Let's see. Oh, here's another person who sent me the same article. So anyway, it's the magazine is made by TMN, Canada's HBO. It's called Feature Magazine. And the author is a guy by the name of Pat Hickey, who
Let's write this down. Pat.
And just in case we ever read another article by him. This is another...
Make sure he's not a subscriber.
Yeah, really. This is from Robert Rosenthal, who's answering something. Someone asked about Ken Patera. He goes, Ken Patera's gym went out of business a couple of years ago. He runs a wrestling school in Wisconsin. He trained Bob Sapp. I wonder if he wants credit for that one. That's one of those guys that did one. What did he do?
Like student saying he did not train Bob Sapp.
Yeah. Vern Gagne produced the most top-level guys, Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, Jim Brunzell, Brad Rheingans, the Nasty Boys. Vern Gagne didn't train the Nasty Boys. They were out of Allentown, I think.
How do you have a gym go out of business, by the way?
That happens all the time.
A few years ago when they were so damn hot.
The gyms, that's Don Morocco. Vern did not train Don Morocco. Don Morocco was trained in Hawaii. And he was wrestling for 2 or 3 years before he ever went to Vern, although his first success was in the AWA. And then the third is, isn't Randy Orton more ready than the other new guys in OVW? I don't think he's more ready than Shelton Benjamin. His basics and ability to sell are far superior. He seems to have surpassed even Rico Constantino in promos. I haven't seen Randy Orton do a promo in a couple of weeks, but 3 weeks ago, which was the last TV, he hadn't passed Rico Constantino yet. After Rico and Damage, he seems the most ready, but he has a better look, just an opinion. Let's see. Best match on the history of Raw. Someone goes 1-2-3 Kid Bret Hart. That was a hell of a match. I remember that one. Shawn Michaels, Razor Ramon. I thought that the match last night would. I don't know which Shawn Razor match they're talking about because that one just doesn't ring a bell. Although I'm sure they had great ones. But the match last night, I thought, at least if we're comparing it to 1-2-3 Kid Bret Hart, I thought the match last night was better, or Monday night, I should say.
You know what else was awesome that someone mentioned was that Rock Austin match that they had like in September before their WrestleMania match.
Of 99, like in Louisville, the one with Mills Lane, where Mills Lane did the thing on TV right to order the match? Yeah, that was really, really
something
good.
like that. And I think it had like a cheap finish or something, but the heat was just incredible.
Yeah. Let's see. Is Scott Hall done in the U.S.? Absolutely not. No way.
He'll never return.
The one thing about those guys, all of those guys, is that all of those guys will be back at some point. Let's see. What does this say? Since The Undertaker really doesn't have much to do, and he will probably go nowhere come King of the Ring time, why not turn him heel and feud him with Benoit? I don't like that. Just don't like it. They got it from, yeah. Let's see.
Say you have like a 40-year-old football player, and he really can't hang, but by God, he works his ass off. You put him on the field.
It's not football though. In wrestling, the one good thing about wrestling is that you can compete after your physical prime because your marketing prime and your physical prime are not the same.
You can't necessarily compete as far as being up to the level of some of these other guys.
Yeah, no, but he should be.
I think there's
around.
a role for Undertaker, and I think there's a role like in the real upper mid card, but he doesn't need to be there on the top.
Yeah. No, I agree. I completely agree. See, this is from Eldon, who says, Kevin Nash stated that guys like Jericho and Guerrero can never be main eventers because of their size. After looking back, I can think of more than one time when Kurt Angle in the main event whooped Nash's booty in the ratings. Hey, Al Snow at the end, would have doubled Nash's ratings. And it's not Nash's fault. It's just like that's what it was. I mean, there was a period, there was a period where, Psychosis and Ultimo Dragon, who were not big ratings draws, even though they were awesome wrestlers, were beating Steve Austin's ratings hands down. So, it's far more important which team you're on as far as, your rating as opposed to who you are. Who you are varies that little bit up and down, but the flat number, that's more determined on how popular the product is at that given moment. I mean, like let's say the other day they did a 4-2, okay? So, I mean, the fact that the main event did a 4-5 showed that it was more popular than the rest of the show, and in a sense, it's probably more impressive to do a 4. Yeah, no. The rest, okay, yeah. But it's probably more impressive to do a 4-5 for the guys on a 4-2 show than to do a 6-4 on a 7-1 show. But if the promotion's hotter, you can be doing a 6-4, and personally be like the dead part of the show. Mm-hmm. Okay. About Scott Hall, there is no doubt he's the one who put Shawn Michaels over in the WWF with the ladder matches. Shawn was already over by then. But the guy, if he can get straightened up, could actually put a lot of people over if used correctly, like he did in WCW, as I recall. If they bring in
Kevin, that we've heard that phrase, if he straightens up, for probably, how many years do you think it's been now? Quite a few.
Yes. And you know what? I'm not against them trying to sign Scott Hall, but again, when it comes to anyone like this, they better sign him with a zero-tolerance thing, and at the first sign of trouble, cut bait. Because if they, start trying to come up with their own excuses on why they shouldn't, that's the beginning of the end. This is a good one. The biggest reason that WWF is losing ratings is because it is on TNN. Thank you.
Wait, let me put that down for the fact.
What? You're going to write that one down?
The frequently asked questions list.
Yeah, you better the whole ratings thing, and also the fact that less people get TNN than get USA, which isn't even true. Although, more people get TNN now than ever got USA at any time that the WWF was on USA, and even if they didn't, it has nothing to do with anything anyway when it comes to ratings, because ratings are a percentage, not a total. Let's see, a percentage of the audience that can get the station. I think I said that one 400 times so far.
You'll say 400 more by the time this show ends today.
Yes. I hope Jericho and Benoit get to run with the ball to establish themselves as top players. The Triple H injury has opened up the door for these guys. I think a title change would be healthy for the company. I know it won't happen, but to see Austin chasing Jericho would be something similar when Austin chased Bret Hart. I feel the fans would accept Jericho as their champion, as he should be allowed to keep the title for the summer and defend the title like Bret and Shawn did. Jericho brings drama into the story of the match due to him not being the biggest guy and the feeling that he can battle back. The time has never been so right for these guys. In a month or two, the WCW invasion could be underway, and I hope they don't get buried. They're not getting buried right now, that's for sure.
Jericho chasing Austin for the title is a lot better than a babyface Jericho being chased by a heel Austin. Makes no sense.
I don't know. I think it's about the same, actually.
Really? Why?
Yeah. Because with Jericho as champion, I think that there's this thing where he's really, really vulnerable, and people think he could lose it at any time. I think with Jericho chasing Austin, there's a feeling of he really can't beat him. That almost may be, why that's why he needs more than one, he needs at least one more pinfall on Austin before that match on pay-per-view in a tag. I mean, where he does it himself without somebody's sledgehammer. Because nobody,
if
nobody
he beats him a couple of times, they could go the whole summer with that chase.
Do you think so? They don't really need to, though, because all they need to do is get this one pay-per-view, because July is the invasion, and then August, they're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, they just need to get the.
I'm talking about the whole summer as far as like house shows.
Yeah, because they're certainly not going to have Rock on House. I mean, I can't say certainly,
if they
but
gave him if they gave him 2 or 3 TV wins, maybe even just like 2 over Austin, he's already got 1, and give him 1 clean win over Austin, and then do a deal where just have any goofball title change hands on a house show, the European title or whatever, and then just go with Jericho chasing him on the house shows.
It's got to be at least Intercontinental because no one cares about European. It's not a bad idea to have the European title change hands on a house show and play it up
and
real
plug
big.
The hell out of it on TV.
Like have it on a Saturday night and plug the hell out of it that Monday. Or even on a Sunday night. Yeah. Yesterday, this is from Brian Doherty, yesterday John Cena brought up he watched a lot of film of his matches, and I've heard other OVW wrestlers bring that point up as well. Sports teams have watched film and tape of their games and practices for decades, but I'm wondering how long that's been going on in pro wrestling. Is this fairly new development and is limited to OVW? When do you figure, I mean, guys, when I was around, almost nobody, started watching wrestling and started watching videos. Very few wrestlers that were active watched videos of other wrestlers. It was a rarity. As time went on, the younger guys who got into wrestling, almost all of them did watch videos. So I think it's just a generation thing. I think pretty much any wrestler under the age of about 35, maybe 40, probably grew, started watching a lot of videos. And if you watch, the younger guys now, I mean, obviously they've watched Mexican tapes and Japanese tapes, and they're our style has taken in things from other styles, which 10 years ago, the idea of if you did something like Mexican or Japanese, you were just told by, the booker that it's wrong. And why is it wrong? It's just wrong.
I don't know about indies around the country, but, I mean, just up here, I think I'm the only person that actually goes out of my way to make sure that everything that I do is on tape. I just see a lot of guys that they just don't even care. They just go out there and they do their match, and that's it.
No, that's different. That's watching your own match.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's watching your own match. That's not opposed to actually watching tape.
I thought that's what the guy was talking about as far as John Cena talking about watching his own stuff.
Let's see. Yeah, that may be what he's talking about. That's something totally different. That is something totally different. We got Max Payne on the line now?
He's here.
Hey, Max, how you doing?
He's here.
How's it going, fellas?
It's going pretty good. How are you?
It's the best day ever. Absolutely the best day ever.
Is the sun shining, or?
But you know what? Because I just am one of those guys who believes that every day above ground's a good day. There's no guarantees on the planet, and the present is all I have to live for. And every morning when I wake up and open my eyes and I go and breathe that first breath of air, I go, all right, man, I'm still here. Cool.
Yeah.
Got to be thankful for that.
Yeah. We had an email. It was a kind of interesting thing because you were in Japan for a long time.
Uh-huh.
And let me just see what the actual question was. It's basically about, like the guys, especially the top, it's basically drug use in Japan, but like with the top guys, that Japanese style is a very physically tough style. How compared to the United States, how would you compare painkiller use and just basically drug use? Is it any different in the two countries?
Well, first of all, the Japanese Society of Medicine is very difficult to penetrate, much as it is in Europe. In Europe, they just won't even give you, you got to bag them to get an antibiotic, for God's sakes, and even then, you got to be really close to death before they'll even give you any kind of antibiotic. So the prescription mentality there is quite a bit different. So it's funny what drug use there is in Japan is kind of imported. The boys, I remember when I was there that, a lot of the Japanese wrestlers couldn't wait for the Americans to come over. They all had, very good friends within the ranks of, the wrestling world. And so, they would have the boys bring them Valium or, perks or whatever. And so what I saw of it, generally speaking, was imported, but traditionally the Japanese just don't, they just don't do and have that kind of a mentality. They think much differently. They think much more organic. They usually try to fix pain and things like that with some kind of a natural or homeopathic kind of medicine. So
herbs.
Yeah, it's not near as prevalent as it is here because, quite frankly, here, you can get almost any doctor in the world, especially if you're a wrestler. You show up to a doctor and he takes one look at you and sees how beat up you are. I mean, they feel sympathy for you straight away. Here, let me just give you an open script for whatever you want, It's quite a bit different there. Besides the fact, the whole pain issue in Japan is treated sort of on almost a sacred part of the rite. I mean, these guys, if kids don't have cauliflower ear as amateur wrestlers, they stand and beat their ears with a locker door to make sure they've got it, so everybody knows that they're a wrestler. So they look at
I don't like that.
They look at Payne quite a bit differently than we do.
Now, the guys there, there's also a certain mentality. I mean, I've seen these guys, and you were around it, and you've seen it too, where, I mean, they're hurting a lot. They're hurting really bad, and they just don't miss matches until, like, they're basically in a wheelchair. Then they got
able
it.
to.
Yeah.
One of my... and something, I mean, the wrestling business, come on, let's face it, is very masochistic. And there's sort of a masochistic element to anybody who wants to be a professional wrestler, because so much of the pain that you incur is self-inflicted. I mean, Mick Foley's got to be the poster child of masochism. I mean, and so when you consider that, I remember one night we were in Japan and we were on this incredibly difficult tour. We were like on all these little, and so Chris and I, we lived with the Japanese wrestlers. So we didn't get to sleep in the American-style hotels. We slept on the floor, and no heat in the room.
That's why Benoit's so tough.
Yeah, it was.
And when you grow up in the business like that, you just don't complain.
You don't. You just, even if you do, there's something wrong. You feel guilty. I always did too. Whenever I hear guys complaining about not having hot soup at the shows, and it would just make me, it would make me cringe inside if they spent any time in a dojo and getting the crap beat out of me.
Did you ever get mad? Because I've gone to Japan many times, and when I would always get mad at Americans in Japan when they would do one thing, and when I was like, where's the McDonald's? And it's like, goddamn, you're in Japan.
How about trying some new stuff, man? How about trying some shabu shabu or some yakuniku or yeah. But what? I'll tell you what though, when you're there for an extended period of time, brother, I'll tell you what. I figured out all the Japanese food because I'm a fat guy and I'm good at finding the stuff that keeps you fat. But there are times when you pass those golden arches, and this particular tour I was telling you about was one of those tours, where you just couldn't wait to get to the golden arches, and I would have to say, I'm one of those guys who was guilty of that. But I also did get, a flavor of a lot of the culture of Japan. But what I was going to tell you is really funny about this story. I want to continue on that story because we're already still there. So we've done this really difficult tour in the south part of Japan, all these little towns, and we hadn't been home back to the dojo in like 3.5 weeks. And so after the show one night, Sakaguchi comes up to me and he says, "Peter, tonight, big party." And I'm thinking, what the heck does that mean? Right? So Chris and I are, big party. What does that mean? So we get back to the hotel, and really, the Japanese, when they throw a party, it's really pretty cool. So we're at this Japanese-style hotel, and it's one where you sit on the floor, and it's very traditional. And they're, shabu shabu, which is fresh-cut, very thinly sliced beef that you dip in boiling water, is being passed around. We're all eating, and just everybody starts drinking. Pretty soon, the boys all start drinking shochu or sake, and they're just really getting shit-faced. And pretty soon, these guys all stand up. They're yelling and hollering. And before you know it, they're punching each other in the face. I'm like, what is going on here? And Fujinami says, "Peter, Chris, come quickly. So we're like, oh, okay, we don't want to get punched in the face. What the hell is going on? So, we leave, go down to our room, and we can hear this insanity going on, and these guys are just drunker than Cooter Brown. And the next morning, Muta, Hashimoto, Fujiwara, what was the big Maeda? Akita Maeda, and then there was the biggest star of the UWF.
Maeda was the biggest star.
Okay, it was Maeda then.
Maeda Takada.
Yeah, and Muto, when he just come back from America, dude, they all looked like, Rocky Graciano. Their eyes were all swollen shut, and they'd all stood there and punched each other except for Fujiwara. who was the one that started the whole thing.
He's doing arm bars.
Yeah, well, no, what he did, it was so classic. It was like one of the most classic things ever. He comes to me the next day and he goes, because they all speak it's amazing. They all do speak really good English. They just speak it with a Japanese accent. But
and they pretend they don't.
Comes to me the next day and he goes, I was just smarter than everybody else. He said, we all said, okay, we're going to punch each other in the face 3 times, and whoever's left standing wins. So Fujiwara said, okay, I get to go first against Maeda. He punched the guy in the face 3 times. He says, you know what, I lost and left. And so didn't let anybody punch him in the face, and they all just laughed about it, thought it was a good joke. But he was smart. He stayed locked in his room, never came back out. They flooded the hotel. There was toilet water running down the stairs, and Gooch just laughed that he had to spend like $50,000 to rebuild the hotel. But it was amazing. I'll never forget that. One of those moments where you just go, oh, my gosh.
I got a couple of email questions that we got to
before we go there, Dave, I got to tell you
Yes.
a quick story. This is I got to toot your horn a little bit because I owe you a big thanks. When I did the first interview, I got to tell you, as you know, that was the first interview I'd done publicly for probably 5 years, and I was a little rusty, partly because there was some stage fright there. I don't think that ever goes away, and we had some bases to cover, but I got to tell you, the response from your fans and from the fans out there to my website and to the movie has been just phenomenal. And so I'd like to say to all the fans that have visited and wrote me emails, I read everything. I'm trying desperately to answer every single email. I promise you I will get to it. It may take me some time, but I will get to it. I'm not the ultimate computer geek, so it's going to take me a couple of minutes. But it's amazing the impact you've had on the wrestling world, and I have to tell this story. I already told you this once before, Dave, but I got to tell you this story about you and when we just got, I didn't even know the name of your newsletter because we just always called it the Kayfabe Sheet. And the funniest person in the business was Sid. And he could not wait. I'll never forget this guy because Gary Young, when we were in Memphis, Gary Young took your paper, religion. I can't even go to the Observer. I have to just say it's just the Kayfabe Sheet. So, here we are, and Gary would get it. I think it came out on Wednesday. Is that right? Or Tuesday?
I would mail it on Tuesday, so it probably...
Yeah, so we'd probably get it sometimes we'd actually get it on Wednesday. We'd try to wait around and hope to get it, but Gary would
how does this happen? Do you realize how great the post office used to be?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it was amazing. But he'd have
mail for a penny.
And we'd show up, whenever we'd show up to TV on Saturday or back to Memphis on Monday, Sid would be like a little kid in the dressing room waiting for the Kayfabe Sheet to show up. And then as soon as it would show up, he would run to the bathroom, and we wouldn't see him for an hour. That always frightened me, quite frankly.
It frightens me, too.
It's black and white. What can you possibly, I'm not even going to go to the fantasy side of that, what he's doing in there. But it was always frightening, the hour. So, it was amazing. Sid, and you could always tell when you'd written a bad review about him. Because he would come out of the bathroom with his jaw, that huge jaw of his, in a wheelbarrow. He always carried a wheelbarrow with him for just kind of those kind of moments. But I'll never forget that. So, I want to thank you. Honestly, you do the industry really a big favor. And it's very refreshing to know there's somebody out there that is, at least giving it a huge shot of keeping a business that's a complete work in check. So thank you for what you do, and thanks to all your listeners and everything that's going on, because it's been the response has been phenomenal, and we got some exciting things coming up. So
I want to talk about that movie in just a second. I just want to get through a couple of emails. This is Brian, this one's for you. This is from Eric Aspel, who goes, no wonder Jericho was being held back. He was already on top to begin with. This article really cleared everything up. Also, last night the poll was over 90% for Brett and Owen, so that poll was major rigged. Let's see. What do we have here? Something for, this is, why does WWF even bother showing heels live from WWF New York when they always get cheered? Well, they're going to pick that up. I think they've already picked that one up by now. There's one thing here from Max. Oh, here we go. This is actually a funny first sentence. It goes, since you are one of the only wrestlers out there that tell the truth because you're never going back. I was wondering what you thought of Shane and Stephanie. Were they always around the shows, and how did the wrestlers look at them back in those days?
Well, actually, Shane was at the building when Brian and I sang for his dad and Bruce Pritchard the first time. And how could
Did he dance?
Pardon me?
Did he dance?
Did he dance to the song?
They were boogieing, drinking some beers. No, they just sit and basically listen. I think that was a big sell point for Brian, because he was the guy's an amazing singer. So, at that point in time, I'm sure that you looked at both Vince and Shane at that point, and they were going ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. They were thinking that, and then they found out the reality about how tough sometimes it is to deal with Brian James, and maybe they didn't feel that way later on. But I know at that moment when they heard him sing and saw that, it was fine. I was glad to see Shane around there because he's a sharp kid. I mean, he's obviously his father's son, So I have respect for Shane. I think the fact that it's a tough position to be the booker's kid, I mean, Vince did it, but I think Shane's the kind of guy who has the ability to do just exactly what his father did, to take the wrestling business to another level, and who knows what that is.
Going back to Japan, did they have any kind of a thing as far as whether it be a foreigner or a native, if the drug thing got out of control, or did nobody get out of control? Like any kind, I know they don't drug. I know they didn't drug test or anything.
I actually have a really funny story about. I got a lot of funny stories about drugs in Japan and the Von Erichs and oh my God, I could just go on for literally hours and hours. But I'm going to tell you my favorite drug story in Japan because I'll never forget this one. So Chris and I's job, basically, when we were there, was to kneel at ringside. So we were really fortunate. I kneeled at ringside for, Inoki Live with Brody and Osaka, and then Inoki Live 2, I think it was, with Leon Spinks. And
oh my God, you were there.
Oh God, I was kneeling ringside. Are you kidding me? And I think it was the Spinks night that Lance Von Erich came. I think it wasn't Mike. What was it was Mike, I think. And the oldest one, not the oldest one. Yeah.
Kevin Carey. There's Kevin Carey, Lance,
Kevin
Mike.
was there, and this is the trip that Hazard was on as well. And
I know.
I was there for all that. That'll take a long time to tell that one. This one's a pretty funny one. And I tell you, nobody but Chris Benoit and Lance Von Erich and Kimura know this story except us. So the show comes, these guys come in the bus, right, and everybody's there. And Chris and I, our job is to go to the ring, kneel at ringside. As soon as the match is over, follow the gaijins. That's what the aliens. That's what they call us. The aliens back to the dressing room. So we come out, and in this particular case, it was Lance Von Erich's turn to come out, and he didn't come out. So Chris and I were kind of panicking, So we kind of ran back in the back room, and they couldn't find him. So we went back out to ringside. So they started playing Kimura's music, and he comes out to the ring, gets in the ring, does his shtick, and then they start playing Lance's music. And I believe this is in the Sumo Palace. In fact, I know it was in Tokyo. And Lance starts coming to the ring, and Chris and I are watching him come to the ring, and it's like the whole deal is in slow motion. And Chris and I look at each other and go, what the hell is going on here? And Lance finally gets there. It takes him 5 minutes to walk around the ring. He finally gets in the ring and starts to untie his robe. And he can't untie his robe. He's so fucked up. He is so blasted, he cannot get his robe off. And now, honestly, this is like 5 minutes. And Kimura can no longer take it. He runs over to him, grabs his robe, pulls it over the head of Lance, and kicks the ever-loving shit out of Lance. Lance is curled up in a ball in the middle of the ring, right? And all of a sudden, Kimura finishes kicking him, and they ring the bell because they counted to 10. Kimura raises his hand, jumps out of the ring in obvious disgust. Chris and I are standing there looking at each other as to, what is the guy going to do? How's he going to top this off? and he's laying there on his back, and we both look at each other and go, what's going to go on? We look at the guy, and he's still trying to untie his robe. He gets up, the robe finally comes off, Kimura's gone, he doesn't know it. He looks around, and Chris and I are like going, Lance, the match it's over, come on, guy. He came out of the ring, got on the bus, went back to the Kyoto Plaza, got on a bus the next morning, left Japan, never heard from him again.
Never. I think the last we heard that guy was in South Africa.
Really? I think that was it. I think that was his last time.
At least when he took his robe off, he wasn't naked underneath.
Oh, my God. It was I don't know what he was doing. I'm sure he's probably in the back injecting Demerol, and he just got way too much, and I don't know what he was thinking, but, boy, what a wrong time to not, the guy would have had a career. They loved the Von Erichs. They would have done anything for him, but unfortunately, that kind of burned a bridge for him. So I never saw the guy again. But that was a good moment, I have to say.
What were you thinking? Because that night was a pretty big night in Japanese wrestling history, because Maeda had the match with Don Nakai and Nielsen that was like incredible, and then Inoki and Leon Spinks followed. Yep. And that match was like, Mick Foley actually wrote about how bad that match. He had some joke about how bad that match was in the new book. I forget what it was, but I was reading, about the Inoki Spinks match that he watched on tape, and it was just hilarious about how how scared. I just remember watching it, thinking like, God, what must Inoki be thinking? It's like he's in this thing, and like nothing's going on. And then that finish, I remember the finish. It was supposed to be like a backdrop, back suplex and pin, and Spinks doesn't go up, so they both fall down. Inoki pins him, even though he never even got him off his feet. 1, 2, 3. And then Spinks jumps up way before Inoki, not hurt at all.
Yeah.
It's like,
well, you got to look at the one thing. See, Inoki knew he always had one thing going for him. Nothing could ever have sucked worse than him and Ali. So once you got that to deal with, you can only go up from there. And the guy was already a legend. And I just got to say one thing. Inoki and honestly, there were times when, I watched. We called him the Chin. And we would watch Inoki, and Chris and I would go, well, what is it? And it was just one of those things. It was like Hogan, Inoki was just one of those guys who could literally go out there and just raise his hands for 15 minutes, and people would cheer for him until he raised both hands, and then they would really cheer, and he'd leave, and they thought they'd got their money's worth. But the guy is amazing. I saw him do things personally that I would never in a million years believe this guy could do. Chris and I watched him put I don't even know how much this is, 5 45-pound plates on each side of a barbell and do reps with them. The guy can't, this was...
What, a bench?
Yeah, on a bench.
That's 495. There's no way.
I swear on my mother's soul, you ask Chris
That's not 495.
Both Chris and I stood there, honestly, talk about the wheelbarrow thing. Both of us were just like, oh my God. Because the guy looks so frail, but he has this.
And he's got such long arms.
Oh, and he's got this inner thing going on that I tell you, he's an amazing cat. I have to say,
maybe
no
he
matter
is a
what,
god.
I know.
I feel very fortunate to
between
have
that and being 60 years old and going with Brock Lesnar for 90 minutes.
I know it. The guy was just. I watched him work with Brody, and that was the thing with Inoki. If the opponent he was working with really understood him and knew how to do the deal, Inoki was down. He would do anything. And I watched him and Brody. I don't remember. I think that was the first Inoki live was in Osaka with Brody as the main event.
Yeah, at Osaka at the Castle Hall.
Yeah, and I remember this so distinctly. Sakaguchi, we were standing in the hall, and Sakaguchi came out of the dressing room and said to Brody, and Brody was, standing there with his hair dripping and everything, and Sakaguchi says, Brody, not too much outside ring, huh? And Brody looked at him and said, yeah, sure, Gooch, no problem. Dude, he was, the only time he was in the ring was when he was passing through it going to the other side of the stairs. He would go straight from one side. They fought all the way through that building, leveled. Every chair in the building was tipped over, and the finish happened someplace in Tokyo, and they were wrestling in Osaka. So it was just
it's a double count as I remember it.
Oh my God, it was amazing. They just fought all over the building, and then it was over, and everybody went away clapping and happy.
Yeah.
So we quit trying to figure out we never really tried to understand psychology in Japan because honestly the Japanese fans are at the point where they clap for great high spots. Oh, great, a backdrop and a drop down and an international good one. Oh, that's a 5. So they hold up. I expected them to start holding up judging signs before too long on high spots.
Before we hit the break, I want to ask you the story about Rick Hazard and Kevin Von Erich.
Oh my God. I'm not sure I can get how much time we got because I need to know a frame because I'll have to obviously paraphrase a lot of stuff to get it out. But
see if we can do it in 5 minutes.
Okay. So one of the most intriguing statements that Kevin Von Erich ever made to me, I'll never forget this. He goes, "I don't understand people who do drugs." I thought that was an interesting statement. We were like in Osaka.
He said that to me once too.
Is that so? Okay, so good. So I'm absolutely telling
this was
you the truth.
in Texas, and it was David had already died, and he was at a spot show, and we were just talking about like the future of wrestling and this and that, and anyway, and he went to me, he goes, I don't understand, like, we were talking about, I don't understand why anybody, life is too short. Why would anyone spend, 3 hours a day in the gym, to build a body?
Yeah.
And Kevin, lifted a lot in those days and probably did it, he probably spent like an hour. So, I mean, and I go, and he goes, like, something must be really wrong with someone like that. And I go, what does your brother do, Kerry? And he just goes, he's in the gym about 3 hours every day.
Yeah.
And then he was another one was like he said the same thing he said that about like why would anyone ever want to do drugs?
Yeah.
So go ahead with that.
I walked by him the next day, and he's got like we walked by the room. We were in a Japanese traditional Japanese styled dressing room where it was just bamboo on the bamboo mats on the floor, and he didn't expect. He was so messed up at the time. He didn't expect us to be walking by him. And we walked by as he was like fumbling for some of his pills in a bag, and it was one of those things where the statement of him saying, "I don't understand people in drugs" thing was still like ringing in our ears, And we walked by, and here he is, it's one of those like a movie scene. You walk by, and here the guy has got like every pill bottle he's got dumped on the floor, and there's like enough pills to sedate half the population of Japan in front of him. And it's like, hey, Kevin, and it's one of those things where he just, spilled the pill. Oh, hey, how's it going? Vitamins. These are vitamins. That's what these are, right? It's like, yeah, right, whatever. The blue ones with the V in the middle, those are vitamins. That's what the V stands for, vitamins. So, I remember that distinctly. So anyway, Kevin and Scott Hall, Barbarian, Manny Fernandez. This is coming. The actual scene of the restaurant is coming secondhand, but it's pretty well documented secondhand because both Chris and I were there the next morning for all the stories on the bus and so on and so forth. So the tour is one night from being over. We have the Sumo Palace the last night in Tokyo. We're in Osaka the night before. These guys decide to go to a bar and drink. And whenever that happened, after I had another incident, we'll have to get into it another time with Samu. But I was very frightened of going with Americans to the bars because I had this incident with Sammy. And so Chris and I both forewent going with these guys this night because you could just see it was trouble. Scott had just received a care package from home. So he was, packed to the gills with all the accoutrements he needed for the evening's festivities. So they all go out to the bar, start drinking. Before they're done, they're going, remember Hiroshima, and pissing on the walls in this bar, and just destroyed this bar. The cops had to come. The whole scene got really ugly, and so on and so forth. And now there's a huge bill, like who knows. And so the next night we're back in Tokyo. And Hazard shows up with these, fake gig marks all over his chest and says somebody jumped him in the elevator and it was the mafia and the whole deal. And that was just a simple ploy to get the heat off of him so they didn't have to pay the big bill and the whole deal. But basically that's what happened. They all went to a bar, got way blasted, destroyed the bar, and had to come up with a working way not to pay the bill.
Wow. We get through a couple of emails. We'll get to some phone calls. Just a couple of questions. Brian, real quick, are you Are you familiar with Yoshihiro Takayama of Noah? That's fighting Fujita.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've seen him on tape and everything.
Yeah.
I just gotta say, I get this email, and he goes, "Do you think that the Fujita fight against the Japanese Fabio will be a work?" And I had never thought of that guy as Fabio for some reason.
Did the person that write that email, was their name Tony?
No.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
My brother-in-law
right,
Tony emailed me this morning, and he used that exact term, the Japanese Fabio.
That may be one of those terms that like either some people on the internet or some full contact people came up with.
Yeah.
Because
it must be like a general term, because that was too weird to hear twice in one day from two different people.
What kind of a question is something going to be a work, too? I mean, in the wrestling business. Come on.
Well, actually, it is a legitimate question. Yeah, because it's supposed to be a shoot fight in Pride.
It's not a shoot fight.
Come on, man. I mean, even the shooting stuff. I just, I think the NFL's a work, so that's how
now you're getting out of control.
That's how cynical I am.
Hey,
brother.
how about the XFL? Was that a work?
They tried, but they sucked at it, so they couldn't even make it a good work. So
It was a work in progress.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was a task to get rid of it. That's what it was.
Okay, Pat Hickey, who's the guy who wrote that Rock Chris Jericho article we read earlier in the show, is a sports journalist for a major Montreal newspaper. I feel even better now. Let's see. Brian, seriously, your frequently asked questions idea needs even more thought. Do you actually think anyone who asks the questions, like the ones you're referring to, are actually ever going to actually read and comprehend anything you write?
That's why you have to wait to read the answers.
Okay. Let's start doing the phone calls. We're going to start with Terry. Terry, what's up?
Hello, how you doing, Dave?
Doing great.
Okay, yes, I'm Max Payne. How do you like it working with Kevin Sullivan in WCW?
You know what? In honesty, Kevin really set forth to eliminate me. I mean, that was kind of the deal. He wanted to work with Mick and, wanted to get me out of there. So I didn't really, I was only a part of like 2 matches before I was done in the WCW. And in fact, the last 2 matches that I was on were just deals where I came to the ring and smashed the Nasty Boys in the head with a guitar. So, which was actually a great joy. But, so I really, in honesty, I can't say too much about Kevin. I didn't spend very much time with him, either as a booker or as a wrestler. So I can't say much.
Yeah, because I'm afraid you would stay in WCW, he would have tried to kill you like he did a lot of mid-carders.
Yeah, well, I wish I had more to say. I would be lying if I said too much more about Kevin because I just didn't spend very much time working with him. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I got a question for you, too, Dave. What are your views of Kevin Sullivan also?
In what way? In what sense?
I mean, do you like him as a booker?
More not than did. I mean, it's like he had a million ideas, and I mean, some of them were good and some of them weren't. Some of them were too deep for the wrestling fans.
Yeah.
I remember once he went through this angle with me that he got about 1/3 of the way into, and then it was cut off back in like the 80s. Yeah. And I mean, the idea was brilliant. It never would have worked because it was far too confusing for wrestling. And the fact is like he had A, B, C, D, and E, but somehow on TV it went from like A to C back to B. And nothing made any sense.
You know what that is, don't you?
A lot of their TV did that with the taping schedule.
Yeah.
That's called the panic mode.
Oh,
yeah.
That's what happens when if you do an idea and you think it's supposed to be great, those guys got their fingers on the pulse of the Nielsen ratings, and if they do something and it doesn't draw, immediately they start backpedaling. Instead, that's one thing you got to give Vince a lot of credit for. He's a lot like Sony. He's willing to take something and work with it, even though initially it may not draw quickly, but he'll see something that he knows down the road once he's built the story and told the story will end up manifesting itself into something great. Unfortunately, the WCW didn't have that luxury because those guys were constantly trying to figure out how to bring the ratings up so they could be competitive.
The worst thing that ever happened to wrestling was people paying attention to ratings too closely. And I mean, believe me, I'm as guilty of it as anyone, but
yep.
It was so much better when they paid attention to the gates because I think the gates really told you a story.
Yeah.
Whereas the ratings, there's so many factors, including the margin of error, that go into those ratings to where, it's like it goes up from a 2.3 to a 2.7, and, 1 week, and all of a sudden it's like, we're on the right track, and it's like, it may not mean anything.
Yeah, I remember, I remember it's just the excitement from Eric Bischoff and that whole crew when the ratings started to go up, and the first time they were higher than Vince's ratings, which at that time.
Well, that was a big deal when it happened.
Yeah, it really was, even though the business was still in the shitter at the time. So, the ratings were like 3 people were watching WCW and 2 were watching the WWF, so.
I don't think it's so much having too much concern about the ratings as much as putting too much emphasis on the ratings as opposed to everything else. There's nothing wrong with checking the ratings and seeing how people are reacting to a TV show, but if you're living and dying by the ratings and you have no concern about pay-per-view buy rates or house shows or anything like that, that's what that was Russo's whole problem.
That was Russo's problem. The other thing is it's actually you should be really concerned with the ratings, but it's like the trend of the ratings.
Yeah.
Because the trend of the ratings is important. I mean, like this WWF thing, that no one's underemphasizing this drop. I mean, that's a real story when it trends downward. But the week by week, sometimes the week by week isn't that important. But if you have like a 4-week thing where you can look back for 4 weeks and go, look at what's happening, then that's important, I think.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's what, whenever you're dealing with the high-pressure situation of, look at Russo, for example. I mean, here's a guy who comes into a situation that had been, it had been great, then it fell, and you're put in a position where you're trying to quick fix something. And, the guy was fighting people within the realm all the time, and I've said this before. That's the problem with WCW and was the problem with the WCW. There was nobody in the WCW with a moniker on their desk that says the buck stops here. There just wasn't that guy, and if there was, he was somebody in the North Tower who knew nothing about wrestling. The boys called their own angles, and the guys in the back room, I'm not doing a job for him, and blah 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 blah. And I actually wrote a letter to the WCW 6 months ago and outlined what I thought personally was wrong with it, and that was it. They didn't care about the wrestling fans. They cared about personifying their own egos and how to get their own agenda fulfilled instead of worrying about what it takes to create great entertainment. That's what wrestling's about, is people walking away going, God, that was a great match. I can't wait till those guys are back in town again, and blah, blah, blah. So the pressure was so high and is so high. Unfortunately, they don't have a choice but to watch those ratings.
Let's go to Mike in Boston. Mike, you're next up. He's gone. Let's go to Wes. Wes? Is anybody here?
Hello?
Okay.
Hey, Wes, what's up?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Hey, Max,
Going good.
First question for you. The Nasty Boys, I've heard a lot of people complain they didn't want to work with them because they kind of sloppy in the ring. What were your thoughts on that?
I got to say, originally, I had some really good times with Knobs and Sachs. I really did originally. And then as I started to work with them, those guys hurt me worse than anybody in the business. I'm a pretty tough. I figure myself to be a pretty tough son of a bitch. But those guys just did not take care of anybody. And I got to tell you, when I broke Knobs' shoulder, and that whole scenario went down, I remember, especially, I spent all my time. I used to hang out with the job guys because I loved them. They were just so real. They were the guys in the dressing room to me that were just so real because they weren't concerned about ego. They obviously didn't feel like they, had anything to shoot for except, they all had dreams of stardom in their eyes, which of course that's why they were there and willing to do whatever they were doing. But they were just such down-to-earth people. And I would watch them run to the list to see if they were working with the Nasties or with Leon. Because Leon and the Nasties had a horrible rep of hurting people, and they only hurt people that they knew they could hurt. They were the most classic examples of the playground bullies you have ever met. Because if a guy was badass and stood up to him and said, you know what, you guys kiss my butt, that's not what's happening, they kowtowed like a bunch of pussies, and they were all that way. And so I would watch those young, guys trying to further their careers, and I would watch them run to the night's agenda, and all you could tell by the look on their faces as they turned away from the page which one of them had to work with the Nasties or with Leon. And I'll tell you what, I had no respect for them in that capacity. When somebody's that way because they take sheer advantage of somebody from a bully standpoint, I spent my whole life, trying to keep people like that in check. So the rumors of the Nasties is absolutely true, and I feel real fortunate I was one of those people that happened to say, you know what, I'm not taking your shit no more.
Also, what's the best, your favorite story of Foley?
I was just thinking about that when we were talking about Mick, and I'll tell you, we were driving through Alabama one night, and I looked over at Mick and I said, hey Mick, I said, have you ever heard Tori Amos? You guys heard this story? Have any of you?
I don't know the story, no.
Dave?
I don't think so.
So I look over at him and I say, Mick, have you ever heard Tori Amos? And he goes, who? And I said, Tori Amos. He said, no. I said, man, I bought this CD, and I bought this CD of hers I think it's called Crucify, and it's like a 5-song mini LP or EP thing, and it's got 4 covers on it. It's got Angie and a Led Zeppelin song, and it's got a version of Smells Like Teen Spirit. So, Tori, when you get a boost from people running out to buy this, if you haven't heard it, I tell you, it is truly one of the most impressive covers of that song. And it really will bring you to tears. And I'm a big softie anyway, and I know Mick is. So we're driving down the road, and I said, well, here, let me play this. And I put it in, and I play it. And when I'm done, I push pause, and tears are streaming down my cheeks. And I'm a little ashamed of that until I look over at Mick, and I hear him go, and he's crying. He's like full-on crying, and there was kind of a bonding moment there for both of us, because we actually used that moment in an interview at a later date where he, added to that when I had seen him crying, I smashed his head into the dashboard and said, wake up, we got a match to go to tonight. So that was just one of those moments in time where we were driving down the road and just shared I would call it a spiritual moment, because it is really a great song. So if you haven't ever heard the song, get it and then listen to it, and then you can laugh hysterically at a couple of fat Twinkie eaters crying like babies driving down the road in a 79 Lincoln Town Car.
Have you read his new book yet?
I have not. I'm
No.
sorry,
Okay.
I have not.
Did you read the first one?
I've read most of it.
Okay.
It's Mick's just got that gift, doesn't he? He just
right?
He
Tell a story?
Just tell stories, and he just has
Yeah.
a way about him where he's so approachable, and he always has that.
He is. I think that was his charm. In like when the top 3 guys were him, The Rock, and Austin. It's like they were, like, for different reasons, not approachable, because Austin was theoretical, the badass that, you admired, but, and then Rock was like this movie star type of thing, and Mick was just like, the guy who lives next door to you that, is out there mowing his lawn every Saturday afternoon with his shirt off.
And is eating pizza after the match instead of back there, doing
push-ups with his shirt off.
Metarexes down,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, he's not with his shirt off, right?
Yeah,
he never goes anywhere with. Yeah, he was funny because he never goes anywhere with his shirt off now because now that he's a big celebrity, he's afraid that like someone will take a picture of him with his shirt off and it'll wind up in the Inquirer or something.
Well, he's certainly not one of those guys that is known because of his physique. He's known because, and that's I'm very proud of Mick for that. I mean, I certainly felt I was one of those people that was in that category. I'm not, I was never attractive because of my physique. There had to be something more for guys like us and Mick. And I'll never forget Bill Dundee asking both Mick and I how we could ever believe that fat, ugly bastards could get over in the wrestling business. And I hope Bill Dundee's listening right now so that
how could a 5'4" guy get over?
Yeah, 5 foot for the world's biggest midget, Bill Dundee. So, I'll never forget that. And so it was a great day to see Mick, rise to the level he rose to.
Bill Dundee rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
Well, whenever you're in a business that's a work and you're going out there, one of the things, Dundee was one of those guys who beat every guy that went through Memphis, including, the greatest people that ever, worked in the business because he was a Memphis stable guy. And, so, he was so hooked into Lawler, that was his deal. So, of course, everybody hated him. The Nasties, and everybody just disliked the guy. So everybody couldn't wait to get a ribbon in on him.
My friend Buddy worked on a show with Dundee once, and Dundee came up to him and said, "What's your name, young man, and how long you been working?" Buddy goes, 10 years, sir. And Dundee goes, "Really? I have never heard of you." And Buddy goes, "I've never heard of you."
All right, touche, man. Touche.
This is for Max. What's the status as far as like the movie you filmed when you were in the WWF?
Well, I'm currently doing all the finishing stuff. I actually am going to have to step away from it just for a moment. I'm going on tour with one of my bands this summer. I'm going to be the road manager, and so I'm really looking forward to that. I just one of those things, I have to do. I will actually still be working on it though on the road. I'm taking my laptop with me, and we'll still be doing the editing. I am right now working on the music that's going to accompany it, and I still don't know exactly what's going to happen. There's a tentative release date of I'm desperately trying to get into Sundance, but there are a number of other independent film festivals, and I still don't know what exactly is going to happen. You never know. But I'm almost at a point where I'm about ready to guarantee, no matter what, this thing's gonna sneak out, no matter what. So.
How many legal letters so far from the WWF?
You know what? I'm not even willing to talk about that right now, and I'll tell you why. Because I like the rumor mill way too much, man. It's way too fun to see what people are saying and what's going down the pipeline. So I'm just going to let that one. Sorry for the moment. I'm going to have to let that one lie. Normally, I will answer any question, but that's one I'm just going to have to let sit for a while and stew and cook all on its own.
Okay, now when you were in the WWF, it was actually one of the points you were there was one of the low points in there. As far as attendance and things like that. What was it like?
Horrible. It was horrible.
Yeah, what was it like as far as because WWF had been riding high throughout the '80s, and then from 92 to 95 was their low point. What was it like with the guys that had been there during the glory period? I mean, what were their thoughts of this? And did they have
or were those guys left?
When you're saying 94-ish, okay, or 93, whatever, 95 maybe?
95, yeah.
Okay, 94, 95 when you're there. And there's a lot of guys who were there from, 91, 90, 89, when business was really big.
Yeah.
What excuses or thoughts or whatever did they have on, exactly what happened to wrestling, during that period?
Well, I have my own opinion on this, but I think in retrospect, I think the world will look back at that time and realize the one who had done the most for the wrestling business, if you could say a single wrestler, let's just talk about one of the boys, the one who had done the most for the business at that time also did its worst.
We're talking about Hogan.
Yeah, of course. And I'll tell you what he did, in my opinion, that was the biggest mistake. And I've said this before publicly, and probably one of the reasons I am blacklisted in the wrestling business, was blacklisted when I was in it, because I wasn't afraid to talk shit about Hogan. I've never been afraid to talk shit about him. The guy is Hulk Hogan. Come on. It's Hogan we're talking about here. But that doesn't make him impeccable. And one of his biggest mistakes, in my opinion, he ever made was the addressing of the steroid issue on
the Arsenio Hall show.
If he would have just come on there and been big baby face and said, "You know what, man," and cried and said, "God, I did steroids, but they weren't illegal, and everybody was doing them, and that's what I thought it took to be a great wrestler. But what? I still believe in saying your prayers and eating your vitamins, and I'm steroid free now, and I'm back. I'm a different guy." Everybody would have forgive him. Everybody would have jumped on board. The wrestling business would have switched gears, because nobody gives a shit. They really don't. And I think he set the wrestling business back 5 or 6 years. I think that was in early '90s when Hogan did that interview. And
91. I remember the night for many reasons. But I'll tell you what, I remember that night because I'm watching. It was actually on tape delay. Because I'm on the West Coast.
And Arsenio,
people were calling me up all night. They're going you won't believe this, you won't believe this. And I'm watching this with the girlfriend that I had at the time, and I'm going
banana.
It was the banana night, as a matter of fact, yeah. But this was before the banana. And I'm watching this, and I'm going he's killing the business. I just go this is, it's like, you just have one of those revelations, kind of like the day that Jamie Kellner made that statement that we're taking the thing off the air. I'm going oh my God, this is irrevocable.
Yeah.
There's always things that go up and down, but it's this was the one where it just hits you.
I get nauseous in my stomach just remembering it right now because I'm thinking, oh, jeez, oh me, that hurt. You know.
Yeah, but I'm watching this. I'm going like he just, and it actually, as much as I thought it was going to hurt, it actually hurt it even more.
Oh, it did. I think it, because you know what it is. It's like somebody it's like somebody you've got. I'll tell you what. I think a great equation is, the L.A. the riots over the Rodney King thing. I mean, here these guys are obviously kicking the crap out of this guy. Everybody watched it happen, and they got off. I mean, and everybody knew that they were either lying or had just great attorneys, or O.J. Simpson, whatever you wanted to put it to, one of those travesties of justice where damn good and well the guy, here's a superhero for all the young kids in the world, and he's just sitting in front of them, bold-faced lying. And I think everybody that was watching that night saw right through his lies. And I think if Hogan had have had the courage at that moment to just really, if he would have buried the hatchet right there, said, look, the wrestling business is the wrestling business. What I did was something in the past. I regret, what I did or whatever, however he addressed it, but at least be honest with it and say, hey, you know what, we've got to move forward from here. I made a bunch of mistakes. I'm not going to make them anymore. The wrestling business is still the greatest business on the planet, and I'm planning on not carrying any crap around in my pockets and moving forward. I think it would have done immeasurable repair to the already tainted look that was happening because of the homosexual allegations and the steroid dealing, all the court and trial things that were going on at that time. And so I just think that was one of the most critical moments ever in the wrestling business.
It's funny. Yeah. Let's go to Paul in Arizona. Paul, you're next up.
Hello, Paul.
Paul.
Let's go to Dan. Dan.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hey, Dan.
First question was, I guess, interested in WWF contracts, basically with TNN. Now they're trying to go with the WCW thing. TNN looking to go long-term with them, or just look at their ratings to jump and then dump them? That
Wait, as far as WCW, there's no deal.
Huh?
There's no contract. There's no deal.
Okay. Well, I mean,
they have a 5-year contract with WWF that's about it started in September, so it's like however many months in it is.
Okay. I mean, is there like any talk of them even going beyond that 5-year contract, or are they just looking, like I said,
Nah, wrestling people don't even look more than a month ahead in wrestling. So to talk about what's going to go on in 5 years,
Next week's a tough situation, let alone 5 years for sure.
I know. I mean, who knows where the ratings will be and who knows where TNN will be? All I know is that if you take WWF out of the TNN equation, their primetime average is a 0.5. So right now, I think they should be thrilled to death that they've got WWF. WWF may not be as thrilled with TNN, but that's another story.
Yeah, sure.
Second question, rumor or not a rumor, did Goldberg sign for the WCW?
What do you mean?
We haven't even heard that rumor, but he hasn't.
But he hasn't. Okay.
Goldberg's got a contract with Time Warner.
Exactly.
And
he's sitting on that contract.
He's sitting on that contract. Now, the only thing that they could do, they could either offer him like tons of money, to get him to give up his contract, which isn't going to happen, or they may be able to, and I don't know the nature of Goldberg's contract, they may be able to just go to Time Warner and go, because they bought 24 contracts from Time Warner when they bought the company. So there may be a chance they could go and say, okay, we'll buy Bill Goldberg's contract for however many million.
Wait a minute. Now, is the is this question will the WWF buy Goldberg's contract? Is that what we're trying to get to? Is to get him so he can work for Vince somehow, or?
Yeah.
Is that what you're pretty much asking?
Him, even to work in the WWF, I mean, let's get real here. I think everyone would love to see an Austin and Goldberg match.
Of course they would.
Wait. I want to ask a question here because I want to ask a question. Isn't it true that Goldberg refused to do the job for somebody? Isn't that a rumor that's
I'm sure there's plenty of people in that company that did that exact same thing.
Well, I got to tell you honestly, knowing Vince McMahon, I don't think if Vince knows I'm sure he's going to investigate attitudes, and I've met Bill a couple of times, but I'll tell you what, anybody who's in that boat, I would say you're going to be hard pressed to get Vince McMahon to buy somebody's contract.
7 weeks ago, for sure, everything's changed.
Yeah.
I mean, they're negotiating with some people that I never thought that they would negotiate with.
Really?
Just because I think they feel they need some new star power, and everyone's boy, everyone's clamoring for Bill Goldberg, and I'm sure that Bill Goldberg refused to do a lot of things.
Everybody, there isn't an everybody anymore, is there?
Yeah, it's only Vince. But even in that company, I mean, I hear it. It's just like we got it. I mean, it really is important. We got to get Bill Goldberg on this TV, or else the WCW thing won't work. There's a lot of people who believe that. So, as far as
can you imagine the ego clash in the dressing room with? I mean, they're gonna have to pull. They're gonna have to flip a coin to see who's gonna do the job between Austin and Goldberg. I mean,
someone's just going to have to say, and there's going to be the one thing about every one of these guys coming in. It's real important that Vince McMahon does this, and he probably will. Is that I think that all of those guys have to be put in a position to where they're selling or humbling or something right away, everyone knows that they will. Because if they go in there and develop that ego that killed WCW and WWF, they'll kill WWF with it too.
You know what? The classic example of what a great teacher Vince is when it comes to that is I'll never forget The Rock had just won a title at WrestleMania or something. And the next night on Monday Night Raw, the guy did the job in the middle of the ring, 1, 2, 3, and I thought, oh my God, Vince just really, I mean, he's obviously the king. But I'll never forget that, and I was watching it with some younger wrestlers at the time, and I said, look, take a look at this. Because this is a very important lesson for people to remember about the wrestling business. The wrestling business is a work. And therefore, if it's a work, then, there's no place for an ego because we're not out there trying to decide who's the natural selection, Darwinistic better guy. Once again, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, which is the deal is you're out there to entertain the people. And I've heard some rumors about Bill not wanting to do the job. I know Steve Austin pretty well, and in the course of a storyline, I know Steve's, one of the boys. I haven't heard much behind the stuff lately on him, but that's one thing you always have to take into account. And the first thing, dang good and well, if Goldberg goes up there, you're right, Dave. He's going to have to straight away humble anybody who comes in there with an ego and say, go out there and do a job for. I don't know if Barry Horowitz is still there.
With Goldberg, you can't do that, though.
He can humble him, but he can't make him do a job for a long time until he gets the big payoff, I think.
Yeah.
He's got to keep him.
My point being, regardless of where that comes, at some point, Goldberg's going to have to really go out there and say, hey. Because the reality of it with Vince is, in the end, I've watched countless, and you guys know this as well as I do, it's not whether your shoulders are down. It's always about what's next and what the future is. If you just go out there and get your butt kicked, then next week you're not going to be on TV and they're jobbing you out to get rid of you. But if the job is to continue and perpetuate a storyline, that's the kind of people Vince has to have on board. And so unless Goldberg is willing to play that game, watch and see what happens. I mean, who knows?
Anything else, Dan?
Well, just a short comment on your comment with jobbing. And I never did watch WCW when it was on. I did have a friend who did, and he loved Goldberg. Never seen him, but maybe if they brought him in, they could learn from the good old Undertaker. He's Mr. Businessman. So I mean, he would job for everything. Rock mentioned that in his book and everything, how business he was. So I just think it would be.
That's because the Undertaker's a pro, man.
I think he would be an immense buy rate for a pay-per-view. Maybe just sign him for just a pay-per-view, and that'd be it,
Yeah, but see, then it doesn't work. No. It doesn't work out because you're talking about $7 million or $6 million, and it's not worth it for one pay-per-view. I mean, you got to get years.
You got to have the guy in the program, or you're not going to mess with him.
Okay.
The reality is, if you ain't got that guy on your ship with you, and you're going to spend that kind of dollars, I mean, I think that's the reality. I would.
Oh, he's got to be there for years, and on top for years to make it worth that money.
Absolutely. And that means you got to be a player, which means, you know what? Hey, as a baby face, you're going to have to do the job. That's all there is to it. Sooner or later, you're going to have to do the job.
Oh, sooner or later, everyone has to.
Absolutely. That's the deal. It's the way the business is. And these guys that sit in the back room and go, I'm not doing the job tonight. I'm so over. I don't have to. Come on. Get in another business. Go play professional. Go play professional football or baseball.
It's entertainment. Let's entertain the fans. And
that's what matters. Your job.
It's a good mentality, but there's way too many people in wrestling that just don't buy it.
Yeah.
Don't buy it.
And then but the problem is also it's like.
Don't buy what though?
No. But it's a selfish business that being selfish gets you over, and that's it's one of the weird things.
For now.
If we talk about like this, there's just like a lot of guys that have done things that are totally unprofessional, and you just go, man, that is so unprofessional, and somehow or other they've benefited from it.
Yeah.
That's, and pretty much everyone in WCW that stayed on top was like that.
But okay, that's a great point, Dave. But think about what you're saying there in and of itself. That mentality, in my opinion, what you just said right there, that's awesome because you hit the nail on the head. That mentality, in my opinion, single-handedly brought the WCW to its knees because nobody in the back room was willing to go out there and go, okay, our goal is to all be pulling in this boat together to create a working environment where the fans walk away going, wow, what an incredible show. In the WWF, it doesn't work like that because if somebody in the dressing room says, I'm not doing the job for him, Vince will look at him and go, oh, you don't want to do the job? You take your tights off and give them to him because he does. He'll do what I need him to do because as important as you are to this game, you certainly are not irreplaceable, no matter who you are. And that was the point in the Rock story that I told earlier is that's the thing you can never forget as a player there is that you have to be part of the team. And I think that's what brought the WCW down and created the environment. It was there when I was there 7 years ago where there was these factions and cliques that, by the time you got done dealing with them, it was like, oh, my God, does anybody really get it in this company? And I think the answer has been a self-fulfilling prophecy. How many wrestling organizations are there now?
Yeah, I know. We also got Tom Zink on the line. Tom, what's happening?
Hey, great. Daryl, how you been?
Tommy!
I love it, brother.
What's going on, Double Dog?
We've been singing in Louisiana with Nick Patrick. Remember that?
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it takes you way back, right?
Some of the great times. Tommy's one of those people, man, I got to tell you. He got me my job in WCW. He was always kind to me.
Yeah, but I tapped out. I thought you were going to break my arm. You didn't want to ruin my career.
Oh, well, thank you, Tom. God bless you. I'll never forget, he went back in the dressing room after he worked with me, my debut, and he kind of sold his arm a little bit until I got back there, and all the boys were, like, looking at him going, oh, my God, he's killed you. You're dead, right? And Tom just was so cool and just put the whole thing over. And really, Tom really had a huge impact on me getting my job in WCW.
Hey, that's what it's all about. One hand washes the other. But
that's right,
something?
Brother. I
think this Goldberg thing, without Goldberg, Mr. Vinny's in trouble. I think he bit off more than he can chew. I'm on the show tomorrow. I think we're missing the boat here. We got to put the past aside and look out for wrestling. You know how much fun we had, right?
Yeah.
I think he needs Goldberg, right?
So you think the Goldberg thing, but Tom.
Oh yeah.
So, but what's going to happen if Bill? I think about the chicanery that's going to go on if Bill goes there and doesn't cooperate.
Listen, it doesn't matter. He needs him. Listen, the big thing is the big scoop that guys missed. NBC, as soon as Andrew Lack was the new president, they dumped McMahon. He puts the spin on stuff. He has all his big machine, all the BS. He bought WCW with no plan, but it makes it sound for the stockholders. He's got to grow his business. His business was 50% wrestling, and XFF failure. He's got real. We got to put this aside. I know Meltzer's got bad blood or issues with him. I did too, but we got to help Vince out. I don't think he really knows. I really don't. This is serious.
Wow.
Big time.
Well, it's the next 6 weeks are going to be a major. They're going to be 6 of the most important weeks in the business because the WCW relaunch. If it goes good, it'll revitalize the business. But if it goes bad, I'm glad that it's going to be tough.
Oh yeah, when are they going to relaunch it? No one knows. They've never said. Not even the guys, the boys. I heard. No one even knows. They haven't contacted it. They have no battle plan. They don't know what to do. Because if he fails again, like you said yesterday on your show, he's done. Everyone's going to jump off Vince McMahon's boat.
Come on, Tommy. Come on, wait a minute. Hold on. I got it. Tom, you know better than that.
What?
Come on. Vince McMahon is done. Come on. The Chameleon?
Yeah.
It's serious.
He's
We're
got,
talking
he's
about
got,
Vinny Mac.
okay.
As much as
he's got to his business. He's a publicly owned company. He's a publicly owned company. I put my money in Intel, stuff like that, not someone like Vince McMahon. No.
Well, and rightfully so. The
Especially with that
business
stock.
works so he can adjust the stock at any moment he wants to. But point being, listen.
It's a slippery slope.
Absolutely. But the reality of it is, you can bet. I mean, first of all, Vince has never been in this position. He's in a position to have it all, or theoretically, like you said, lose it all. He's not going to lose it all. It could get bad. It could get ugly. Red Bastien told me something about the business a long time ago. I'll never forget it because he said something. You can kick it, you can beat it, you can stomp on it, you can throw up on it, but you can't kill it. And he was talking about the business. Vince relies on that and has relied on that. And Vince is one of those guys. Remember one thing, and I said this to Vince when I met him and sat in his office with him. Hogan was not the pinnacle. The pinnacle has never been achieved because there's no such thing in a business that's constantly evolving. He did it again with Stone Cold, with Triple H, with The Rock. The business is going to go down again. It's inevitable, but that roller coaster may be necessary for the business to go on before it can come back to the top, because there's going to be some fumbling. As great as Vince is, there's no way around it. There's going to be some fumbling and some problems.
Okay, yeah, but it's a publicly owned company now. Wrestling's on a slide, right? Yeah. No one wants to touch wrestling. Even Dave knows that. But publicly
owned or not, I guarantee you, Vince still has a sign on his desk that says the buck stops here, and it can go down. There's no question about it. Yeah, it's publicly owned.
Oh, it's down.
Yeah, it's a whole different ball game. But you know what?
Martha Stewart does better than Vince.
He'd regroup and start all over again.
Really?
I really believe that. Vince is never going away.
Okay, the thing is with Vince, is that they have probably about $250 million of cash on hand.
Yeah.
That he's talking about.
So that's a lot of money, and they're never going to, they'll go down, but they're never going to lose $60 million.
Accounts in Switzerland.
Okay, no, I'm talking about company money. Okay, no, but the thing is, he's got a lot. I mean, he's never going to lose. He'll go down. And he could go down. He's going down quicker than anyone thought as far as like the last 7 weeks. I mean, it's been scary, but
it's going to be worse.
And the odds are it'll probably get worse. Okay,
you want to hear Matt Payne's take on this whole thing?
Yes.
Here's my deal, guys. I'm gonna put my feelings out there. I personally believe, and I believe this with all my heart, the business has no choice but to go down, and I'll tell you why.
Cyclic?
And I think the business has to go down because it's fallen away from the fundamental thing that makes the wrestling business great. And Tommy, I think you'll agree with me on this, is that the art of the wrestling match, and Vince is one guy I never thought would succumb to this, has really succumbed to this, is not the essential part of the business.
Right. You've got, you know what it is, and you know what was so good? I don't know if you guys watched Monday's TV, but one of the things that was great about Monday's TV is they had a match, and who won and lost the match was of paramount importance, and that's one of the reasons why that match got over. But one of the reasons why things have slid is because you got to a thing where when the winner and loser of the match doesn't matter and the fans don't care, then ultimately they just don't care unless you have like some soap, unless you've got a soap that's good, strong, which they had they've had a couple of strong soaps. Right now they have no strong soaps.
You know what? Then it becomes as disposable as a website that won't load up fast enough on your computer. Oh, I'm going to go do something else. That's the mentality everybody's in right now. I think the wrestling business, I don't think it needs to go backwards. I think it needs to go forward, but forward in a different way. And I tell you, everybody's going to laugh at me when I say this, but I believe this with all my heart. Wrestling, professional wrestling, for the first time in its history, has the opportunity, and I'm going way out on a limb, everybody's going to think this is crazy, but I'm crazy enough to say it, so I'll say it. But the wrestling business has to go for even a more mainstream acceptance, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. High school professional wrestling programs, why don't they exist? You have to ask yourself that now, especially considering what people know about the wrestling business. There's no excuse for professional wrestling to not be an Olympic sport. It doesn't matter that it's choreographed or that you know who the winner or loser is. Everybody knows that about ice skating. You still tune in and watch it. I think the professional wrestling has to go all the way to grade school mentalities, start all over again, because here's the deal, guys. Once this whole thing happens and Vince is the king of the world, where is he going to get talent from?
That's why Ohio Valley is so important.
Where the hell is he going to get a talent from? Yeah, but one place, come on, Dave, one place is not enough to support an entire business with the superstars you need. You know, I just truly believe wrestling has to look at itself differently now. It's done the extreme, the quick fix, the TNA. It worked for a minute, which is exactly what you would expect it to do. But once the TNA grips wore off. There were no substance stories there, and that's what wrestling has to do. It has to go reinvent the wheel and start all over at a very ground level and teaching kids the basics and understanding the fundamentals of professional wrestling as an art form.
But, Daryl,
yes.
His bottom line is in danger, okay? These guys aren't marks that invested in a publicly owned company. They think he was a genius and this and that. His stocks, look at the slope. I'm on the internet right now. It looks bad. They want the stock graph to go up. He's got a real bad deal going on. Okay,
Tommy, I agree with you.
Before the big investors pull the plug, okay?
But
Vince
has never been a quick fix guy, though.
Yeah, we look at the Brian. Remember that Viacom stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
Viacom's selling off.
I think the quick fix thing this is my opinion. I think the quick fix thing will get Vince in more trouble than it will if he takes his time, builds this thing correctly. He really has a shot owning the WCW to really create an incredible
plan.
When does a quick fix, though, ever really turn anything around, though? I don't think it ever has.
No, it never does.
Whenever they freak out and panic like that, it just does more damage.
Worse.
He has no plan. Name one guy that knows a battle plan that's been contacted by Vince McMahon for WCW. No one's been contacted yet. He has no plan. He's buying time. He has no plan. He can't afford 2 failures in a year, just like Dave said yesterday on the show. Right, Dave? And
there's a lot of pressure on him not to fail on this one. That's one of the reasons why. It's one of the reasons why I'm glad he's not going to rush into it.
Yeah.
Because if he rushed into it, there's more of a chance of failure than sitting back and start it when you're ready.
That's probably the only good thing that will ever come out of the XFL is he learned that lesson.
Yeah.
Well, the best situation you got,
$60 million, but
he can sit back.
The other good thing that he did, there's actually, the other good thing is that he learned not to believe what people wrote about him. Because he was reading that stuff about Vince McMahon's the world's greatest promoter. He can do no wrong. He's going to compete with the NFL with second string players.
Wait a minute.
And I'm sure he believed it. And all of a sudden, the reality is that he's part of this world. He's a great promoter, but. You gotta have a battle plan, or you can't just go in there and go, I'm Vince McMahon and I have all the answers. It's like you gotta have that plan.
Well, he got the big booyah on the first shot. But
Daryl, don't you think he was surrounded by yes men? All those guys, where are they going to go? Work a job? Look at all the guys. They've flooded the market. He was surrounded by yes men.
Yeah,
the king has no clothes. No, Vince, you're a genius. He's a Caesar, right?
But Tommy, what happens? What does Vince do? Let's think about this. What does Vince do whenever he's in this situation? And he's done it. I mean, look at a great leader. You look at what they've done in the past, and Vince has surrounded himself with those people consistently in the past. And every time it gets out of hand, what does he do? He withdraws from them, goes back to his core, which is Pat and Bruce and the guys that that really understand the art of the business, that understand the fundamental part of the wrestling business that makes it strong. Is a story that is as old as time. And that's when the business, they'll go back to ground zero. You watch Vince is one of those guys, he's smart enough to do this. He's not going to come out and be stupid. He knows the business like his back of his hand. He can take the downtime for a while, but I truly believe that the wrestling business, really, it's time. Take a step backwards. Let's figure out where we're going to go next, because the future is I believe, is always bright. There is no pinnacle. It hasn't reached its supreme achievement of success. There's something bigger out there once again. And you know what? There's a lot of failures. The wrestling business is about falling down. And guarantee you one thing.
And getting up too.
McMahon will get up again.
But
the one thing, though?
50% of his business was wrestling, and he was going to grow it by the XFL movies, right? Correct, Dave? That was only half the plan.
On. You guys really believe for 1 second? Listen. I mean, whatever Vince is, I'm going out on a huge limb here, but you guys all know, and everybody that knows Vince McMahon. First of all, you know damn good and well he spent a lot of OPM when he did the NFL or the XFL.
Oh yeah.
So that's one thing. 2, whatever Vince spent on the XFL, you can bet your sweet behind that it certainly. He looked at that chunk and went, I can very easily piss this away and still walk away and work and live the rest of my life in Fort Lauderdale in the nicest house in the world, and you know what I mean? Vince did not sacrifice himself to the point with the XFL that he was.
No, he's not. They're not. They're years and years of. They're many bad years away from any financial trouble, especially by jumping the XFL.
Yes, and that's my point.
The one thing though is, like this thing can go up and it can go down, but you know what? If they If they do like a Bill Goldberg and Ric Flair as the heads of WCW, WWE, they have a huge money. I mean, they could be bigger than they ever were if that feud is done right.
And he can make all that money lost, and he pissed away on the XFL. So put the past behind, sign Flair and Goldberg, bite the bullet. You pissed away $70 million on football players.
I really don't think he pissed it away. I really believe there's a lot of people out there pissed off at Vince because I'd bet money that a huge portion of that $70 million was somebody else's.
Well, yeah, and NBC's.
Not of the $70 million, of the $120 million.
Half of it was NBC's and half of it was Vince's.
Yeah,
okay,
no, I'm with you. There's no question. But even the $70 million that was his, it was something that he got from someplace else that he went, this is easy money.
You don't think he's
effect on my business.
His ego's hurt. His ego, oh God, his ego's crushed.
You think so?
Oh, he's a big shot. Oh, yeah.
From an ego standpoint, this was a tough one, yeah.
I worked for a chemical company. They called and they said, NBC called, they were trying to get the stink of McMahon off the building, okay?
They got him bathing in Febreze, man.
Okay, you guys, we're totally out of time. This was a really fun show. Max, we want to get you on for sure. I want to remind everyone, Tom Zink will be on tomorrow. We're going to have Monday, we'll have Bobby Heenan. It'll be a taped show because it's Memorial Day. Wednesday, we got Bruce Mitchell. Thursday, we got Mick Foley. And Friday, we got Brian Blair. So the next week or so is going to be really hot programming, and we'll see you all tomorrow at 5.